Saturday, May 8th, focused primarily on the zoning changes that are being proposed for the town center, which is also known as the B-1 district, for the inner and outer core thereof. And if town citizens have some questions about what is being proposed, the folks assembled here tonight, Aaron Hunt from the B-1 committee, Josh Filer from, I never get the acronym right, Mass
MAPC.
There you go. Is with us as well, and Rich, of course, town planner, and Blythe is here as well. And
we do have Ed Haddad and Gary Sullivan with us from the B-1 committee.
Well, that's good. That's wonderful. Some more very knowledgeable people who have participated in this for over 2 years. So let's open it up, Rich, and you can be the master of ceremony here.
All right. So if someone has a particular question, they can raise their hand or just unmute themselves and ask the question. Of course, if there are no questions, this might be a short meeting too.
Hi, this is Pete Bartoloni. Can you hear me?
Sure. Go right ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm looking at your Facebook posting for this evening, and with the access for Zoom and so forth, and there's 2 sections below that, the executive outline bullet and then the 2-page background summary. Those links are not working. Does anybody know how we might be able to gain access to them?
Yes.
I'm coming up to a 404 error on the Town of Norfolk website.
Okay. So I'll go in there. I can't do it at the moment, but I'll go in there tomorrow and fix the link, the broken links.
Okay.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Blythe, those 2 items might be on the warrant packet too, I think.
Rich, this is Karen Riley just chiming in. I think he's referring to the post that Kevin made on the Norfolk community page. Those links are broken. And is Kevin on this call? I don't see him.
I'm on the website right now, and on the home page, I can open both the links.
Yeah, I think it's just Kevin's links on the community page.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure who just raised the issue, but if you go to the Town of Norfolk actual website page, you can find the links right there.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, great. Again, there's a Facebook posting with the yeah, it is Kevin. It is Kevin's Facebook posting for the session tonight. I'll go on the webpage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
Anytime.
Is any see any other? We'll give a few minutes.
There's someone here who we don't usually see, Judy Brabantz. I don't know whether Judy might have a question or not.
Hi, this is Judy. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So we own property down in the center of town, and we're just trying to get a grip on what exactly I came on more to hear what was going on with the zoning, as opposed, I didn't really have a lot of questions yet, but can you give me like just a brief rundown? I've read the warrant, but I'm not quite sure what the whole project entails.
Well, I would say that the prime intent of what we're trying to do is to bring mixed use development to the town center, trying to set in place a set of zoning bylaws which will be attractive to the people who presently own undeveloped property there in the center of town, to encourage them to build
Right.
and something on the order of what you see at 18 Union Street there where the Norfolk Credit Union is. That's the
Right.
type of development we're trying to encourage. And hopefully the bylaws that we've crafted with a lot of help from a lot of people over a 2-year period are going to be sufficiently enticing to get folks to actually go ahead and start developing their property.
Okay.
That's
All right.
that's the main objective, what we're trying to achieve.
Right. That was kind of my understanding. I just wanted to make sure I understood what was going on.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Glad
And if, for example, if you have a piece of property that's developed, it's also redevelopment too. So it's not just limited to vacant property.
Well, I want to jump in here too, because I don't want to sell the multi-year process that we've all gone through short here. I mean, we've already mentioned the web page in town, and if folks haven't visited the web page for the B-1 committee, I suggest that you do, because there's quite a bit of documentation and reports there. When we talk to the reports, of course, Josh Fiala is on the phone with us here, and he represents and led the process from the MAPC, the Planning Council for the state. That they put together a very detailed report of the whole process. So if anyone listening, Judy, I would strongly encourage you to dig up that report and give it a look through, because there's a lot of information in there about what's planned, what the process is, and what the potential outcomes might even be. So it's much more than any one of us could summarize. It would take us 45 minutes to summarize it in with any detail. So
okay, thank you.
And for Judy and others on the call, Josh has been very helpful to the committee over that time period, and has provided many a report that has aided the committee as they put together the proposed zoning bylaw changes. He's earned his money.
And there is, which was asked about just earlier as we started the meeting, there is an executive summary too, which kind of goes through each one of the specific zoning changes to give you a highlight of what's proposed, and then you can definitely dig deeper into some of the other reports.
So just, all right, I don't mean to interrupt. So that's on the website for the committee, right?
Correct. Yep. The B-1.
Town of Norfolk. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question of those listening that may be new to the conversation here, but of all the documents that I've just mentioned and referenced and reports that have been put together, the executive summary that Rich just mentioned, some of the documents that have been prepared, the video that we recently prepared, I don't know if folks have seen, also a very good summary for those that haven't seen it. And actually Blythe and Kevin and Josh put together a very good summary in the latest. Blythe, you're gonna have to help me with the little video that you and Kevin do there. Community
forum.
Community forum. Yeah.
Yep.
All very good resources, and all an effort to get the message out to the public. Curious to hear from the public what message has been received, and if there's any way, any way to communicate that hasn't been tried yet, in order to reach a broader audience. If anybody has any thoughts on that.
Can you explain what the community forum is and how that is accessed?
I can give that a go if you'd like. So the chairman of the select board, current chairman, Kevin Calcutt, and I have been recording this series called Community Forum about every 3 to 4 weeks, where we cover upcoming topics that are important, just a range of what's going on in town. We dig deeper into a particular topic like these zoning changes, and then kind of helpful information of dates of things coming up people should know about. You can find all of those episodes on Norfolk Community Television's YouTube page. You can find all of these various government meetings, but in particular, this forum was forum number 6, and it was posted about a week ago.
Okay, great, thank you. So just one other question. If this passes at town meeting over the weekend, does it in turn have to go to the ballot or not?
It
No,
does not.
Okay, thank you.
it goes to the Attorney General's office for the state of Massachusetts, and they review it. But they're more looking at uniformity, constitutionality, but it doesn't go to the.
Okay, thank you.
And that community forum is on the B-1 committee page too. There's a link directly to it if you want to go there. Is there any, Sandy joined? Do you have a question, Sandy?
No, I don't. Thanks.
So this is Karen. So Aaron, I'll just go back to the question that you just mentioned a few minutes ago. I've been following along with this probably since you guys started, what, a couple years ago? Can't even remember now. I probably can't remember either. And, you know, I try to, you know, put all the information out from your meetings and stuff on the community board. I don't know if people actually go and look at the information, but I don't know, maybe we should roll some trucks downtown and start digging and that seems to always spark some
Yeah,
interest
yeah,
in questions.
that's true.
Aside
Park,
from that,
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Park a drilling rig in the center of town with a sign on it that says B1 committee. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, didn't think of that one. Good idea. Rich, let's look into that.
Aaron's going to be a streaker through the center of town. That'll get attention.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that. I might-
Thanks for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a long journey here, so.
So I did see.
This is Donna.
Sure. What do you have?
I've been following this for a long time, and I appreciated the public forum way back when we were at the Freeman Kennedy cafeteria, and there were photos. I remember Josh explaining what is a vital downtown in New England. And there were photos that if you had a 3-story building with only a sidewalk in front of it, it seems overpowering. But if you set it back more, it seemed more tolerable. And those pictures might help explain what you're trying to do with these changes. You know, people go through Walpole Center and they go, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I think it's horrible. It's very tall. There's only a sidewalk in front of it. So
Yeah, 5 stories. Yeah.
I appreciate, you know, and driving by, it looks like empty commercial. Yep, they've got a fitness place to work out at. That building may be great, not in Norfolk, right on the street. Thank you.
Yeah, Donna brings up a good point with the document that we haven't mentioned yet tonight, which is the design guidelines, which is our effort to sort of diagram and illustrate potential buildings and some of the potential impacts of the different guidelines that and requirements that we've discussed. Not necessarily directly tied to the zoning requirements, but another document that we've been referencing for some time now.
Yeah, and we should all recognize that we are going to be handicapped a little bit on Saturday in the sense that we do not have a screen where we can project anything to get to the attention of the assembled citizens. We're going to be outdoors, and we'll have a microphone, but we will not have a screen to project anything, unfortunately, as we would if we were indoors.
Rich, at one point, I'm maybe taking this a little bit sideways here. We had talked about potentially putting a hard copy of all our reports and documents and things to the library. Did we ever get a chance to look into that? I'm thinking of the design guidelines would be a perfect example of that, right?
Good question. I have to. I'm not sure when. I'm not sure we have them there at the library. I think when COVID hit, we didn't get pushed more towards the website than actually hard copies, but certainly could bring a copy over to Libby and have it available at the library. I believe the design, just think as we're talking here, I was looking on the website. So we do have design guidelines.
Rich, is there a plan to have any type of handout aside just from the written warrant articles? Where you're going to have any diagrams as part of the town meeting? That people can, there's probably what, 300 people coming.
Yeah, so we have the one-page document summarizes the zoning changes. We have the executive summary. We're going to have FAQs. I don't have any documents with pictures necessarily for
Well,
town.
Rich, maybe we at least should put the map as part of the handout.
Yeah,
The map is in the warrant,
That's right. You're right, Blythe.
yeah,
but
no,
I'm putting together the all articles presentation, and it's 38 slides, pages at the moment. You know, I could add in, you know, a couple slides, if you will, just so it's reference in the handout material people are holding on to.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't want to have the whole, you know, one pagers that we have try to be stuck on a half-page slide. But if there's some bullet points on some slides, I can definitely drop those in.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have slides, a couple on energy aggregation. I have the Metacomet trail, you know, on a slide. So, you know, we could do that as well. We're going to produce it double-sided, 2 slides to a page. So that gives you a sense of scale. But we can drop a couple things in if that helps.
When's your deadline?
I need to print them all on Thursday. So if I got it tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah, got it. Understood.
Sure.
Yep.
so we do have, and I don't know, maybe because this would be black and white, but we do have the illustrations that Josh had put together on the website. There's 2 pages. Maybe that might, I think that kind of helps get to what Donna was raising, the point. We have, you know, it illustrates what the buildings will look like. I mean, it's at a higher, you know, it's a much higher view looking down on town center. But maybe that might help. And then we can take a look and maybe grab another picture. So it won't be color, but we could put some pictures in to give the Blythe for the slide presentation. That would do a better job to illustrate that point, that the design guidelines that have been developed would not produce what's in Walpole Center. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is Karen again, sorry. So now my phone's ringing. So Zach McKeever, I think is how you say his name. He made a post earlier today on the community page about the article for the Metacomet Greenway Association, and he sort of did a question and answer thing. Maybe you guys could do something similar to that. In that document that you just mentioned, Rich, maybe the first question could be, hey, what could the downtown potentially look like? And then you could provide the link to where that is on the town page, and just maybe, you know, the top 10 questions and put them out there. I mean, I know the community page is a small audience, but at least it could be a start. You know, just a summary of all the top questions that people might have around the B-1 Center stuff. Just a thought.
No, I think that's a good thought. We have kind of a working draft of an FAQ.
Yeah.
We were going to finalize it after tonight's session. So
Yeah.
I think some good questions that are raised we can add to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can I ask another quick question?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is Judy. On the map, what is the B-1 out? On the map that's in the warrant and on the website?
Can answer that for Rich here. So there's two portions of the B1 district. There's the
Right.
B1 inner and the B1 outer. So the guidelines that we're talking about, the zoning changes that we're talking about would apply only to the inner district. The outer district would remain with the zoning as it is today.
Okay. So that would be the out. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and on that map in the warrant, the B1 inner is the darker of the two sections there.
Right. Yeah.
Should we,
Can I jump in here 1 second, Rich?
sure.
Hi, it's Sandy. I remember you had read some letters at I think it was a Board of Selectmen's meeting that were from developers, and you might want to be able to address those at town meetings, that if you lower the thresholds in some of the districts to adding 40Bs, that they would just put in for 40Bs. That might be concerning to people. How would you address that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think a couple of the developers have raised that point of where we have landed as far as the amount that's being proposed for inclusionary zoning, that they might, it's, again, that's their thought on it. I'm not sure if they ultimately will do that, but because the proposed amendments for the inclusionary go all the way up to 20%, and there's a rounding factor that all of a sudden the math starts to look more favorable from a 40B standpoint for them, and not have to do the commercial. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer because, it's unknown, right? So,
But Rich, you could potentially answer it a different way, right? And again, sometimes when you talk about numbers, it's all in how you look at them or how you present them, right? So I believe the questions that you're referring to were specifically about, at what level the 40B regulations start kicking in, at 6 houses, 10 houses, or an escalating scale, 10%, 15%, 20%, et cetera. And in my opinion, the developer's point is the more restrictive your 40B regulations are, the better chance you're going to invite 40B regulation, which on the face of it seems to make sense from a math standpoint. But again, you can't look at it. I don't think you can look at it. I wouldn't recommend that folks look at it from a pure black and white standpoint in this case. The zoning regulations that are out for consideration are a wide formula of potential changes that work together to be, a sum that's better than the individual parts. One of those parts is 40B. One of those parts is building height. One of those parts is building area. One of those parts is parking size. But if you take the changes that are proposed for the zoning guidelines in general, there's a different level of what's the right word here? There's a different level of invitation to developers to come to Norfolk and build in a fashion that's acceptable to the town. So again, it's hard to pick out any one point. So to speak specifically to the 40B projects, the numbers that we're talking about aren't that different than the numbers that exist today, right? Between 10 and 20%. So if the developer was going to come into town today and develop in town, they would be at 10% of their project being 40B, right? We were talking about maybe going up to 15%, and we sort of settled on this escalating scale. But in terms of the 40B housing being the trigger that makes a developer go to 40B, I don't think that's the math that sets that trigger. right? So, and the other thing is if you start to look at the individual sites in town, there's only, a lot of folks have mentioned, 16 units per acre for say, right? And they're starting to hear big numbers. But if you look at the sites in town, there's only 11 sites that are above 1 acre, right? There are 2 of those sites are above 3 acres. Only 2 of those sites are between 1 and 2 acres. So there's really only 4 sites where you're talking about, as they exist today, there's really only 4 sites that are above 1 acre in terms of development. So we're not talking about large parcels of land. Again, we're not talking about Walpole type size development. So I'm rambling on here a little bit, but it's a long way of saying, I think you need to take the sum of the parts into consideration with this, and maybe not pick at the individual parts as some of the comments that have come in from different folks have done.
I would also add that zoning is fungible, and if we find that developers look at the affordable housing steps that we have included in the zoning and take the worst case scenario and ignore those and come forward with 40B developments, we can change the zoning again back towards 10% or 15% or some more simple, less restrictive affordable housing requirement.
Yeah, and I'll take my long ramble and say it another way too, because I talked much more than I intended to. I think everyone here would agree that the zoning regulations and changes that are being proposed are less restrictive than they are today. In which case we are much more inviting to potential development in any way, shape, or form than we are with the current zoning guidelines.
Oh, that's a great point, Aaron. And I think Walter had mentioned that as well. I think we will, we've set that we're inviting some additional development opportunity with changes to the zoning bylaw to set the table. Now, hopefully those generate interest in those projects that come out of it that are positive to the town and to someone who wants to do development. If it turns out that something is becoming a constraint, then we'll take a look at it to see whether it needs an adjustment or not. So it's not an absolute. I think the overall goals, though, we wanted to try to encourage mixed-use development, provide housing, and do a little bit better job than we are currently as it comes to affordable housing. If there's something that needs to be revised, we could take a look at it. So, for example, maybe there's a bonus provision that we give consideration to, which isn't necessarily specific to the bylaw changes right now. We could always, so there's more than one way to take a look at it if it doesn't seem to generate some development opportunities.
Right.
Can I ask another question quickly?
Sure.
About the map, back to the map? I just have another quick question. I'm looking at the map on the website as well as the map in the warrant. So the shaded area that abuts, that goes up and down Union Street, so it's not as dark as the B1, but it doesn't say it's out. So is that considered part of the B1 district, the Union Street corridor there?
Yeah, that's part of the B1 out section.
So that whole section is out. Okay.
Yep. Anything in that lightly shaded.
Because the other ones are labeled and that one wasn't. So I was curious, because if you look on the website map, it doesn't make that differentiation, so it's hard to tell. So
good point. But it is intended to be B1 out.
Okay.
Yeah, and more specifically to Union Street, there's the the mixed-use building that's on the corner where
Yes.
Norfolk is, and then the one house on the same side. It's a single-family home right now. That one is in the B1 inner core, but under the proposal, it would go to B1 outer. So it would be, it wouldn't have the benefit of these higher, well, more intensive development requirements. It would actually be under the present requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No one's asking a question, so I'll ask a question. Would it be fair to say if we were 40B compliant, we would still target changes of this nature because we want to develop the center of Norfolk in a particular way with mixed-use buildings as you were describing? So although we have a lot of conversation around 40B, and yes, in this area, we have now closed the gap between what previously existed and hopefully what gets approved at the town meeting, but we would want to make these changes regardless of if we were 40B compliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, the intent of the changes is to kind of foster that mixed use development that would happen, which would have that commercial piece of it as part of the residential. Not to go too deep, but essentially the 40B generally is all residential. It doesn't have the commercial with it. So part of the vision for the B1 is to try to provide, you know, additional commercial space, which may be restaurants, shops, retail, services, etc. And those might, that type of development may generate more interest in standalone too. So it doesn't necessarily mean it could be a mixed use, but additional development in Norfolk Center, which has more disposable income to support more business development, is kind of the overall goal, right? So if there's more people in close proximity to town center, then maybe someone wants to do a make commercial investment. It doesn't have to be mixed use, but maybe that if you take it all together, it starts to provide those opportunities to do it. So.
And Gary, I would, you know, that's the point I was trying to make when I guess with the first question that was asked, it's hard to summarize everything, but I mean, if you go to the B1 committee mission statement, right, which is summarized with plan for and promote a financially viable and diverse town center, capitalize on and enhance the existing town center character, plan for the forecasted population growth of 10 to 20% or 1,000 to 2,400 people over 10 to 30 years. Proactively deter unfriendly 40B projects and update the B1 town center zoning bylaw regulations. So, you know, by no means was the main singular focus of these zoning guideline changes to address 40B. There were other equally, if not more so, important items to go with it.
Serendipitously, as I understand it, the legislature has passed and the governor has signed a new law which requires towns with MBTA stations to create a zone within a half mile of that station that will accommodate multifamily housing. And we happen to have a set of zoning in front of the town meeting this coming Saturday that will, I believe, comply with that law. And if you don't comply with it, it makes getting grants from the state somewhat difficult, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think, Walter, that's a great point to bring up. I think that's important in terms of, you know, we were in this effort for the past 2 years, working with a density of roughly 16 units per acre. The new legislation starts at 15. So we're one more unit above the minimum, but that minimum also includes by right, which is part of this zoning proposal package going before town meeting, which does give the town the opportunity to go after those grants. And those grants have been sought after and have produced improvements for Norfolk. More recently, the Causeway that was done on Lawrence Street was a Mass Works project. But some of the streetscape improvements in downtown Norfolk, where we're talking about, was part of the former PWED program, which is now MassWorks. So the town has availed themselves successfully in the past, and would certainly, I would think, want to again in the future tap into those funds. And so you're right, that's a critical piece of this, that and we have mixed use, multifamily. We have a reasonable sized district, so I think everything is pointing that we would achieve the objectives of that new legislation if this were to pass. There's a couple other grants associated with it too. I'm trying to think if there were.
Well, with things that are coming up now, Rich, like the potential updates to the master plan, potential updates to the open space plan, those are all funds that we chase grants to cover. All of that, all of that grant and fund money would go away if we're not compliant with the new regulations.
Yeah, and one of the grants, well, the Housing Choice Program is also tied to it, which we're actually doing the wastewater study with right now. So we are actively in the grant arena when it comes to the town, and the new legislation is tied to those grant sources that we have used. And I would imagine we would continue to chase those going forward.
So that would seem, this is Sandy again, that would seem really important to convey to people at town meeting, that we are going to have to be at least 15 units per acre to be eligible for grants. So that's in the pro column, if you're making pros and cons.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can, yes.
Because I don't think many people know about that new law.
No, it's a fair point. I think you're right. It's probably. Is there, so Gary, you seem to be good at questions. You have any other questions you want to throw out there?
They're slow to develop, but I'll have a few more.
So Rich, this is Karen. I'll throw another one out there as I'm just reading through the article right now. A question someone might have is, if all these zoning changes go through and now we're suddenly faced with, updating, or can our current water system handle, the development down there, what's the cost to the town? Potential cost to the town, I should say.
Yeah.
Someone might have that question. I know, just throwing it out there.
So I think the one thing that we did take a look at when we were doing the study, the type of development we're more likely to see from town center are not heavy water consumers. But nevertheless, they would be paying, they do need to be connected to town water, so they would be a user, but their consumption level wouldn't be as high as someone connected as a single family home per user wise. But they would be paying their water bills like anybody else tied to the system, and their connection fees as well. But
And Rich, I'll jump in there, and I think some of the MAPC reports touch on this item as well. But with any development infrastructure, with any growth in town infrastructure expenditure is certainly something that needs to be planned for and managed. What we've talked about at length as part of the B-1 committee, the planning board, is that commercial property is much more valuable than residential property. So which are both much more valuable than undeveloped property. So if you start to look at the property that, or the I guess what the properties give back to the town, and you put it on a scale, an undeveloped property delivers X, a residential property delivers 2X, and a commercial property delivers 3X. I'm making the numbers up, but I'm making the point where commercial property is much more valuable than undeveloped property, and therefore contributes much more to the town budget to develop things such as infrastructure and further future studies.
So if you're putting together a question, to put out there on the community page, that might be one to add with that answer Aaron just said. Thank you.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, in terms of the three main utilities that, or four main utilities that you would think about in town center, water is one, gas is another, and gas is available. It needs to be expanded a little bit, but it's there in the center of town. Another is stormwater, and the stormwater system is well developed in the town center. And the last, of course, is sewer. And presently there is a sewer study underway to understand what could be developed in the town center with a sewer system.
To piggyback off of what Aaron was saying, as far as development goes, when you take a look at the development with the improvements on it, the new building, and then the revenue generated, some of the mixed-use development we have seen, a more recent example obviously is 18 Union Street. So from a revenue versus services, it is more on a higher revenue positive from a tax base standpoint. And I did reach out. I kind of knew this, I suspected this anyway, but I reached out to both the Dr. Alardi from the Norfolk Public Schools, as well as the King Philip District. And what I suspect would be the case, there are no school children in the apartments that are at 18 Union Street. So from a cost, from a service, they're not bringing kids necessarily into the school system because they're 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. I know that was part of a little bit of discussion on the community forum. And so more likely the type of mixed use development as it relates to bedroom count probably would more likely continue to be within the 1 to 2 bedroom unit types, which there is a demand for. They don't generate school children on themselves. There might be some occasions, but as a whole, they don't. We did take a look at Boyd's Crossing, which is not apples to apples because they are single family homes, but there are no school age children in the Norfolk Public Schools. However, there are 2 children within the King Philip School District. So of the 40, there's 39 occupied right now. Of the 39 units there, which are a combination of 2 or 3 bedrooms, there's 2 school kids there. And that's an example of a
I
single.
think to piggyback on that, Rich, as I recall, Josh had made a couple of comments along those lines a couple of months ago during one of our meetings, and you might have some additional information to add to that. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but.
No, thanks, Walter. Yeah, so I referenced that in the community forum discussion with Blythe and Kevin, and MAPC put together a study a couple years ago that looked at school enrollment data compared to housing production across all of our 101 municipalities to see if there were any data trends. Effectively, over that 5-year period, there was no correlation between housing production and school enrollment. So you would see some communities where they have no housing production to speak of, except the school enrollment is really growing fast, and then others where they have produced many housing units and there's no bump in school enrollment to go along with that. So the expectation, I think, in what we see as potentially one of those myths out there that sort of makes sense from maybe a common sense perspective, that you would think if there's more houses being produced that there's more kids that come along with it. But it actually just doesn't work out that way from a data perspective. So, and I think Rich, your anecdotes in terms of the most recent development in Norfolk Town Center is an illustration of that.
Thanks, Josh.
So Rich, sorry, this is Karen again. Just one other thought. So, this kind of meeting was posted late on the community board, and I'm sorry, I probably should have posted it on Sunday, but thank you, Kevin, for posting it about a half hour before the meeting. What if we just post a question out there, with a link to this B-1 article and say, hey, what questions do people have around this? And that way there you can kind of gather some more questions before Saturday.
Sure.
Good idea.
I mean, I'll be happy to do it.
Sure. Yeah, that would be fine. I know Kevin seems to be our gracious responder to answering questions when they show up on the community page, so we can.
Yeah, and it might not be a place just to even answer the questions there, just to kind of gather any of the questions
sure.
people have,
Yeah.
but
Right.
get it out there for people to start reviewing it too now.
I think it's a good idea. So I see iPhone Kath has her hand up.
Yes, this is Kathy Fox on Boardman Street. I was wondering how many more tie-ins can our water system hold? It seems like those of us who have town water, our rates just went up because of a new well. Now, are we going to need more with these extra tie-ins?
I'm trying to think. We have there is built-in additional capacity with the bringing of the Holbrook Street well online. So it's, I think within the projections that we're seeing that could happen in Norfolk Town Center, there shouldn't be an over demand on the water system, because again, what we're seeing here would be, they're commercial, which, depending on the commercial use, could have a water demand. But on the residential side, they're much lower water users because they're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. They're not a whole household. So the water consumption are much lower than you would see in a single family home.
Yes, but they still consume water.
They do.
In addition to what we already use.
Yeah, and I would tie that into some of the comments that I've thrown in tonight about, the commercial property is more valuable and gives more to the town than residential property. But, one of the reasons the planning board charged the B-1 committee with this exercise is, we've seen growth in town over the last 10 years of 10 to 20%, and fully expect to see that same growth in the next 10 to 20 years, which is another 1,000 to 2,000 people. So that growth is expected to come to town, whether we change the zoning guidelines in the B-1 district or not. So I think part of what we're doing here with changing the B-1 zoning guidelines is to try to encourage some of that development downtown, where we can get the commercial development and bolster downtown to provide the active downtown center that some folks are looking for. So I think the answer that the B-1 committee would give to this question is we need to plan for and encourage this development and plan for it wisely, and make sure that the town infrastructure is there to cover it over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Thank you.
I have a question about that, but as a town, we are not self-sufficient with water. Our wells do not produce enough water for our current demand. Is that correct?
I can jump in on that. I mean, we are challenged right now in summertime. We did have to buy water from Rentham on 2 or 3 occasions last year. And Holbrook is generally meant to be, to help us with making sure we can meet those demands. It's not meant to be able to necessarily expand, but it's more for redundancy and to enable us to rest the wells, the 2 that we have, so that they can recharge. So I think part of it is, I think what Rich is saying is correct, that these are not necessarily the types of uses that are going to be high water use. And coming along, if you've been following the, in the news lately, the state is talking about some much more serious restrictions on water use, regardless of where you are. And I think we're going to be experiencing that as well. So while we may have more growth and more need, we'll also having to be tamping down on how much people actually use, and really, we tell people they can't hook up sprinkler systems, but people still use them. They don't necessarily all have wells, and we're going to have to do more work in that area. I think we're going to be okay in the near term, 5 to 10 years, but I would also say it probably won't be a super long time before we've got to think about another source at some point. We made good strides, but we're not going to be able to rest on our laurels if the growth happens that Aaron is talking about.
Is it beneficial to give some incentive to people that do have their own wells they have their own wells, let's say for their lawn irrigation, and provide them with incentive to get off the town's water?
Something to think about. I'm not sure. But I mean, we just may have the state imposing restrictions like people have never seen before, because water use in the whole state, if we have summers like we did last year where you're more in a drought than you're not. I mean, we seem to be slowly recovering this spring, but will it last, is a question. And it's not just tied to Norfolk. So I'm not sure that's helpful or not, but
no, but we do. I mean, the part answer help with the question too is that we do have people who, they have the town water running in front of their homes, but they choose to stay on their well. So they're, I'm trying to remember the exact number, Blaine, if you remember, but there's a fair amount of people who could connect, but choose not to. So they're relying on their own well for water supply.
It's complicated.
Yeah, last time I heard that number, I think it was 800, as I remember.
But the reality of the B1 district would probably not increase usage by another %, or it would be somewhat low if you totaled it all together.
So can I jump in on one point on water usage? It might be interesting to offer some water reduction plans for residences that have old, even just like toilet fixtures that are, high flow still. I mean, that we ought to look at some ways that we can save water and maybe offer an incentive there.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to talk to DPW. I think.
Well, I think too. Sorry, Rich, to cut you off here, but I just again keeping it to the B1 conversations here. And I'm trying to think of. We've talked to a lot of landowners and developers and interested parties in this. And I don't think a single one of them has said, "Well, I can't develop in Norfolk because water's too expensive." Right. So. Again, the water is a problem that the town has to deal with and solve. And so is growth, and the two go hand in hand together. It's something that goes beyond the B1 zoning guidelines.
And well said. Is there any other questions of doesn't necessarily have to be the public, as we now learn. It could be committee members, planning board members, town officials, whatever question you might want to throw out that we could have available for people to hear response to.
I have a question, Rich. Assuming these zoning changes for the B1 inter go through, are there other incentives that the town has maybe considered for the redevelopment of existing parcels, that you spoke about, not just the empty land? I think we like to think that our zoning changes are going to incentivize the empty parcels, but some of the, I'll call, some of the existing developments that are downtown, which could use a little refreshment, refreshing. Is there any other incentives that the town has ever considered to incentivize those people in addition? Has that discussion been had in addition as a joint kind of incentivization, if that's a proper word?
So no, it's a great question. So I think one of the things that came out of all the B1 work is that, we're currently doing the wastewater master plan study for Norfolk Town Center. And, when we had reached out to some of the property owners within town center, some of them, the infrastructure is what would help them for the properties that are developed to redevelop. So, for example, I think Rockwood Road is a great example of the Pacini property where the cleaners are right next to the train tracks and the liquor. What's the liquor there? I'm trying to think. Forget
We got the food mart there.
Food mart.
Yeah, the food mart. So discussions with them, they're on a limit, there's a limited amount of area there. And so the ability to try to do redevelopment with a septic system is pretty challenging, almost, I won't say next to impossible, but pretty complicated development project. So for some of those properties, I think the sewer could potentially be one way to help them for redevelopment. And the other one, which we haven't explored yet, but still is potential opportunity. Maybe there's some investment, like tax incentive considerations that we could approach some of those property owners to try to maybe tip the scale if some of the zoning doesn't do that. But that would be more, probably more the future phase, but also kind of that nurturing of trying to, which we talked about obviously in the B1, to try to get some catalyst projects. But off the top of my head, definitely the sewer's one for sure. That could potentially help them. And then there could be some financial incentives that we could help look at as well. Some towns do that for those type of projects because while you might help them get a partial relief on taxes through a tax incentive deal, the town would also gain in future taxes too. So that's something that we certainly could give consideration to. I think, and last I would say, we are going to be embarking on doing the master plan upcoming within the next year or so. So I think those are things we need to kind of dive into to help supplement the work that we're doing right now with the B1 to look at those kind of things.
Thanks. I guess in the same vein, I remember when I first got on the B1, I think I asked this question early on. Is there any kind of a disincentive in our system right now for the people that own properties and they're not developing them, they're just leaving them barren? And I guess I'll use like a taxes or something. Is there something to try to motivate those people to not keep a parcel undeveloped?
I think generally we probably want to, as a philosophy, try to incentivize, not de-incentivize. And depending upon, the circumstances around each property, I think you send the wrong message to a degree by, I don't know if legally we could even do it. That'd be the first question, I guess. But even if legally we could do it by assessing people for vacancy, because there's a variety, different reasons for the vacancy. So I think it probably would send the wrong message, actually. I don't think it's,
We talked through a few ways to try and do that as part of the B1 conversations, you know, whether to Rich's point, a lot of it was more about incentives to develop rather than penalties for not developing. But yeah, there were some legal complications. You know, there's the inevitable, if you make somebody do something, they're going to do just enough, and it might not be really what you want or need downtown for development anyway. I also think we kind of, the way the conversation came full circle, if I'm remembering correctly, was, you know, let's put some changes out there to try and be less restrictive and be more open and more inviting. And then, you know, if that isn't working, you know, then maybe we can talk about other ways to, we did talk about a vacancy tax for, I won't say properties, I'll say tenancies that are left open for too long. You know, again, there were pros and cons. But at this point, I think we're trying to focus on, to Rich's point, we're trying to focus on being less restrictive with our zoning guidelines and being more inviting to future development that is in the general interests of all of the townspeople.
And Ed, to piggyback on what Rich said a moment ago, a thing that we have heard over the years is infrastructure are the items that really get in the way of developing water, sewer, stormwater, and gas. So if you can solve some of those problems, you'll put in place incentives for people to develop. For example, we have Dunkin' Donuts who wants to do something with that vacant piece of property that he owns next door, where we sell Christmas trees in December. But he needs some more utilities there, particularly sewer, in order to pull that off. So that's the type of thing that we've heard and have been trying to react to with providing those utilities in the town center, or at least looking at the sewer anyway.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Well, Rich, we're ending up talking to ourselves here a lot. We've been at it for over an hour. I don't see anyone else signing on, so perhaps we ought to take what we've learned and work on putting a few Q&A questions together that we can have available for a handout at town meeting, and call it a night.
I agree.
What do you think?
I agree. I think that's a good idea. I do appreciate all the questions from, excuse me, from the public and town officials and committee members. I think it was helpful to provide some additional information to address some of the questions that came up, and some ideas to do that, to accomplish that. So we'll turn that to our next task. And so would you like me to sign it off?
Very well, please do.
All right.
Thank you all for participating.